not going to continue from the beginning, right? Start over. Parashat Miketz, Chag Chanukah, Lilui Nishmat Gila Facha Bat Nu, Vegam Etali Naomi Bat Gila Facha, as well as Reuven ben, what did he say? Benina, Reuven Benina, Ruach Adonai Tinachar Gan Eden. I want to connect a few things. I really want to discuss the holiday of Chanukah, but I also want to connect it, and I think it happens to be very connected to who my mother was. As we mentioned, that we don't really do hespedim during Chanukah, and I'm not interested in doing a hesped, but rather just to connect certain points of the life of my mother and the legacy and takeaways that we could learn from it that is very much associated with the holiday of Chanukah. So let's start from the Gemara itself. The Gemara tells us that the mitzvah of Chanukah is a very famous Gemara, Masechet Shabbat. The Gemara says, Mitzvat ner Chanukah, ner ishu beto. The mitzvah is every person in his home, not somewhere else. Sometimes people, they don't know the halakha. Like, maybe I'll just light at work instead, because that's where I am until very late. The halakha is, there is no such thing as lighting at work. You light at home. Ner ish u beto. In the house of a person is where he fulfills the mitzvah. Even the Bet HaKnesset, there's a mitzvah to light in the Bet HaKnesset, but you don't get credit for that mitzvah. That's a communal mitzvah. That's like reading Sefer Torah. It doesn't mean the person, the individual, gets credit for his mitzvah, his personal obligation is ner ish ubeto. And the Gemara famously continues and says, the main mitzvah is a ner. Ner means one candle. You don't have to light more. If you want to perform the mitzvah of ner Chanukah, you just have to light one candle. Ve'ame'adrin ner lechor echad ve'echad. If you want to be mehader, you want to do extra credit, you want to go above the letter of the law, do a little bit more meticulous job, then every person lights a candle. Meaning every person in the household, or for every person in that household, you light a candle. Then the Gemara says, Ve'hamehadrin mina mehadrin, the highest level of hidur, of due diligence in this mitzvah, is you light, according to Bet Hillel, Kimispar hayamim hayotzeim, the number of days that have exited, meaning the first day 1, the second day 2, the third day 3, and you go up, mosif veholech, you continue to add and add. That's what the Gemara says is the mitzvah of ner Chanukah. Now, it's very surprising, if you stop and you think about it, what did the Gemara see to make such a big deal out of the mitzvah of Chanukah, as opposed to so many other mitzvot, where really the concept, the basic concept of being mehader, doesn't just apply to Chanukah. There's a concept, we say it all the time, ze eli ve'anveu. Whenever you perform any mitzvah, whether a person gets himself a tzitzit, something that basic. He wants to buy tzitzit, he should buy the best tzitzit. He's getting a shofar. Which shofar should he get? Best shofar. Etrog, we have a lot of hidurim. When it comes to the arba'a minim, you have hidurim. When you build a sukkah, you try to build it in the most beautiful way possible, even though, technically speaking, you can make 2.5 walls and you get credit for the mitzvah of sukkah. But the Ramah writes, you shouldn't even do 3 walls, you should do 4 walls. Why? Because it's even better. It's more hidur to do 4 walls, to have 4 walls. Well, I could do 3 walls and get credit for it. Yeah, this is a hidur to do 4 walls. So see, even mitzvah sukkah, and the Gemara talks about Sefer Torah. A person writes a Sefer Torah, how meticulous, every letter should be done properly. We buy tefillin for our children. We try to buy the best tefillin. We'll pay $1,500 for tefillin. Why? Because it has that hidur and this hidur, and it's black the other way, and it's the best quality, and it has, a string going through it, and it's all the different chumrot that you could have. That's the hidur. So every mitzvah has it. Why are we making like a sort of a stint, a big deal about Chanukah? It has mehadrin, and then we make another level, mehadrin mina mehadrin. What's special about Chanukah that this mitzvah was sort of selected to be paradigm as the highlighting of the hidurim, such a focus, such a meticulousness. I even saw, there's a Kaf HaChaim, someone asked me this question. He says, how come we have all this mehadrin mina mehadrin, but we never find anything about the Chanukiah itself? Sometimes they sell in the store, they sell you like a plastic base in case you get stuck in some island and you don't have a Chanukiah, you have a plastic base. Why don't we find any hidurim in that? I told him, listen, there's a Kaf HaChaim that actually writes there's 15 levels of materials on the Chanukiah, and he goes through. Aleph, best material, gold. Second best, silver. Third best, bronze. But the bronze that looks like gold. But then the fourth level is bronze that doesn't look like gold. So like all these levels, and it goes through glass, it goes through earthenware, all these, and then it, like at the very end, it has like eggshells and different things like that. Like that's the bottom, when you're stuck with no choice. But you see, like, what are all these levels? What's going on with Chanukah that we have extreme levels of hidurim? So that requires explanation. What are Chachamim trying to convey? What message is going on behind this? And of course there's a Gemara, and this Gemara is something that I think really is powerful if we stop and we think about it. The Gemara says something that's vague, very difficult to understand. Amar Rav Huna, comes along Rav Huna and says, Haragil bener, a person who is very accustomed to lighting candles, Havian le banim talmidei chachamim, is going to have children that are Torah scholars. Rashi says, what's Hagil bener? Bener Chanukah, bener Shabbat. A person who's accustomed to lighting nerot Chanukah and lighting nerot Shabbat is going to have children that are Talmidei Chachamim. Now this sounds as mystical as you could get, and the Gemara usually is not so mystical, it's not so segula oriented. Is there any logic, is there any understanding? What's the Gemara saying? A person who goes and lights candles, he's going to have children that are Talmidei Chachamim. And to me it's actually a very personal question, because I know that my mother would always tell us that she would look back and say, what was the reason that she was chozer b'tshuva? Like my mother is one of 11 children. And she has 5 brothers, 5 sisters, and herself. She's one of the older ones. She's the second oldest in the family. Older sister she has. And most of them, for most of their lives, recently some started to be chozer b'tshuva. But the majority of them, for the majority of their lives, are not religious. And she looked at herself, who, from the very beginning when they first came to America, which was 40 years ago, 81, it's over 40 years, they've been in America, they were religious most of the time. Like pretty much since I was born and beyond, they were religious. And they weren't before. When they were in Eretz Yisrael in the first years in America, they were not religious at all, like nothing. Very basics. Mamash basics, like misolti, like we find today. Like a lot of times in our community, in the Sfaradi community, you find that concept like misolti, but you don't have to elaborate. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. You do kiddush, but then the television gets turned on right after the kiddush is over, right? That kind of a level of religiosity. So she would look back and say, what was it that I had the zechut to sort of uncover the religion and to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and children that go in the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when all around there were problems. A lot of other people, other families, community-wise, family-wise, they had difficulties. The children weren't being raised the way that parents wanted them to be raised, and things weren't looking right. And in her family it was. So she said that one of the major zchuyot she always felt was because when she was young, she would light a candle for her grandfather, and her grandfather was a big tzaddik. She comes from a family of Kohanim, from her mother's side, their family of Kohanim, and they were big tzaddikim in Iraq. And she would always light a candle for her grandfather. She says, I think it was that zechut that I would light candles for him when nobody else would do it. She would do it on a daily basis, that she was zocheh. So to me it's like personal, because she would light candles, and bemet she was zocheh to see children Talmidei Chachamim, son-in-laws Talmidei Chachamim, grandchildren that are Talmidei Chachamim, and it's like, what's going on? Is this really just a segura? Somebody lights candles and all of a sudden his children become Talmidei Chachamim? Or is there more to it than that, which is what the Gemara seems to be indicating? I mean, there has to be some level of correlation and connection, especially since we find that a lot of people lit Chanukah candles and their children didn't end up Talmidei Chachamim. Now this question is asked by Rabbeinu Yitzhak Sagi Naor. He is one of the Rishonim. He asked this question. He says, I don't understand. We find in the Gemarot, Harbe asu velo alta beyadam. This concept that many people did and it didn't work for them. So Rav Huna is saying, no, if you light candles, your children are going to be Talmidei Chachamim. But we see with our own eyes that a lot of people light Chanukah candles, Shabbat candles, and their children are not necessarily Talmidei Chachamim, and sometimes aren't even, religious as a result of it. So how do we understand what Rav Huna is trying to say? What is the depth behind what he's telling us over here? So to really tap into this, we have to get into one of the main Sfarim. This Sefer became popular in recent years. If you would have asked 20 years ago, who's the Zera Shimshon, a lot of people wouldn't have known. Today, it's become like it's, it got a lot of notoriety. The Zera Shimshon, especially because there's like all these segulot. If you learn Zera Shimshon, then you're going to have this segula and you're going to have Yeshuot. And so people started forming groups to learn, which is great. You know what? As long as people are learning, it's great. But they should know that all of Torah is a segula for Yeshuot. The person who connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the source of all bracha. So it's not just Zera Shimshon, but it's also true about the Zera Shimshon. So you can't say that it's inaccurate in any sense. So this is good, Baruch Hashem. The Maaseh, the Zera Shimshon, in his Sefer, he asks a question, Parashat Vayeshev, he asks this question. Also true for Parashat Miketz, it's connected as well. But he asks a very, very basic question. We find that in the Nis of Chanukah, we really have two miracles. We have an amazing miracle that they won a war that should never have been won. Really, if you think about it, you have a bunch of rabbis that are untrained soldiers, and you say to yourself, how are they going to win? They don't even know how to hold a gun. They don't know what they're doing. They've been sitting and learning Torah all day. They don't know tactics of war, the tanks and all these other things. And they're going to go wage a war against this army that's impressive, and they're bodybuilders with muscles like this, and they're working out in gyms, and they're in cages all day, right? And they're doing all their military tactics and the most high-tech weaponry that exists at the time, and they're going to beat them? It's like a joke. There's no way for that to actually happen. And of course, the Chashmonaim, because they had HaKadosh Baruch Hu on their side, the victories didn't make sense, but they happened. And today they call this guerrilla warfare. They give it an explanation. They went and they waged a guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla is not the same word as gorilla, like the animal gorilla, but it's a similar concept that basically you ambush and you do tactics and you take a little bit of the army, you separate them and you beat them, and then you take their weapons and you amass and you gain confidence and more people join. They made a whole bunch of explanations to it, but all the explanations don't really add up. There's only one explanation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that was waging the war and the one that gave the siyata dishmaya for the Hashmonaim, which really started off with a core of 12, 13. Chashmonaim is nothing. It was nothing. Armies of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people were sent to fight them. With a core like that, they were able to defeat. And eventually, as the way it explains in Megillat Antiochus, there more soldiers added on as their confidence built, as they were able to gain more territory, more people joined in the battle. But still, it was an incredible defeat, a victory for the Jews and defeat for the Greeks. So that was the Nis. That was Chanukah. The word Chanukah itself, right? What does Chanukah mean? Chanu Kafhe. They rested on the 25th. Rested from what? They rested from the war. So the whole miracle of Chanukah was the victory. The Beit HaMikdash was taken over by the Greeks, and the Jews, Baruch Hashem, the Chashmonaim, were able to come. When they entered into Beit HaMikdash, the first thing they did was kriyah. They tore their garments because they saw what the Yevanim did. It was a massacre to Beit HaMikdash. It was terrible what was going on. They didn't even know how could we use this Mizbeach. There was blood of pigs all over the stones of the Mizbeach. They had to replace all the stones and bring in new stones. And the whole Beit HaMikdash was in shambles. They really had to redo a whole project in order to restore the Beit HaMikdash. But they did it in almost no time. And one of the first mitzvot that they had was to light the menorah. So they won the war. They light the menorah. It's supposed to last one day. It lasts 8 days. Great miracle. Magical, essentially. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did nisim v'niflaot, and we celebrate the miracle of the oil. So asks the Zera Shimshon, I don't understand, that's so not really important. If you think about it, why are we celebrating the oil? Every day in the Beit HaMikdash, there were 10 miracles happening on a daily basis. There are always miracles. The Ner HaMa'aravi, the candle of the menorah never went out. It would last forever. So that would happen on a daily basis in Beit HaMikdash. We don't find any celebrations for that. There are miracles happening left and right. We don't celebrate them. And especially a miracle that's really not important, right? If it didn't happen, right? Let's say the oil lasted 1 day, and they would have to wait another 7 days, and after 7 days they'd light the oil. Let's say, worst case scenario. Even that's not really true, because they were allowed to use oil that wasn't pure. Sa'alacha. But let's say they didn't light for 7 days, and they would have lit it afterwards. What would be the end of the world? We'd still be here today, we'd have a Torah, we'd have mitzvot, we'd have Am Yisrael. But if they would have lost the war, It would have been devastating. They wouldn't have had Beit HaMikdash. They wouldn't have the empire of Torah, the Mishnayot that were composed in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Leeor Dahan, Hillel HaZaken, these great people that were able to migrate and to establish Torah Shebe'al Peh. We're not going to be able to do that under the rule of the Yevanim. Nobody would be keeping anything. So that's a major victory. That's a victory that actually mattered in Jewish history. The oil really didn't make much of a difference. So what are we celebrating? The thing that seems to be the tangent and the ikar, the main, we're not seemingly celebrating so much. This is the question that asks the Zera Shimshon. And he gives a brilliant and very powerful answer that we have to really internalize what he says. He said, you look back then, okay? So when the Yevanim were in control, there was no such thing as a mitzvah that was easy. I mean, you couldn't perform mitzvot. You couldn't keep kashrut. Basic things. You couldn't keep Shabbat. There's nothing more basic than Shabbat. If you want to know if somebody's religious or not, you ask, is he Shomer Shabbat? They couldn't be Shomer Shabbat. They would be killed. They found them in caves, trying to keep Shabbat in the caves, and they said, if you don't come out and violate Shabbat, we're going to smoke you all out. And the Jews didn't want to come out. They lit a fire right by the entry of the cave, a massive fire. The smoke killed all the Jews. 1,000 Jews died because they kept Shabbat. Meaning, even something as basic as keeping Shabbat, they were unable to do. Let alone Taharat HaMishpacha, learning Torah was unheard of. How could you learn Torah? Where are you going to learn Torah? It's all dangerous. They had to pretend like they're playing with the dreidels, right? So they couldn't keep the most basic and simple mitzvot, the calendar, Rosh Chodashim. All of these were at risk of being lost for good and never to be restored into Am Yisrael. So the victory of the battle was essentially very consequential. It was a defeat of the Greeks that was necessary for Judaism to essentially continue. Now, one of the things that is very important to realize is that Am Yisrael is very different than non-Jews. You know, non-Jews, they also celebrate battles. There's a lot of battles like America celebrates every single year, Normandy, and the victory they had when they came and they defeated the Nazis in World War II. Obviously, Independence Day is a very big day in America. These are holidays. Every nation has a holiday about their victories. But there's such a huge difference. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu purposely, says the Zera Shimshon, wanted to highlight the difference between the celebration of Jewish victories and non-Jewish victories. We do not celebrate victories. We couldn't care less for victories. Victory is not a reason to celebrate. Victory is a means to get to a goal. If the victory leads us to keep more Torah mitzvot, that's a reason to celebrate. If the victory does not end up in such a result, then there's no reason to celebrate an inherent victory. Now let me give you as an example. In America, when they had the Revolutionary War, what were the Ta'ana, right? The British, they came and they colonized America. They had 13 states. You know the history, right? The history of America, right? 13 states, and the states got upset. Why? Because the British started taxing the colonies. The 13 states were called colonies. They started taxing them without representation. And they started taxing goods, and one of the main taxes was on tea, and tea was very big, obviously, because it was British, right? So it was very big. The British still to this very day drink tea. And of course, one of the main slogans that emerged from America, no taxation without representation. The Boston Tea Party, they took all this tea and they threw it into the sea, right? They made a whole big gosh. One thing led to the next. It ended up becoming a revolution and a revolt against the British. They fought a very, very difficult war, a war that was not so simple for them to succeed. George Washington had his back against the wall, against all odds, really. They really didn't have much chance against the British, but they managed to win because the French came along and they helped them out, and they supported them, they gave them whatever they needed, and that was really what made the big difference between victory and the loss. It's interesting because France, I'm just thinking out loud, like France had that also with Israel. The nuclear reactor that Israel had was really because of the French, and a lot of the original ammunition that they received to fend off the Arabs who were attacking them, they were the ones that started. The Arabs started the war against the Jews. How did they defend themselves? Where did they have all them? It was from France. They were the ones that gave them all of their material. So it's interesting that France actually helped Israel and also helped America 200 years beforehand to win the war against the British. But what was the whole victory, this big celebration, the big thing? Well, you asked them, bottom line, what did you accomplish? We're not taxed on our tea anymore. I mean, if you boil it down, that's really what you're celebrating. So you're celebrating the victory. But we won, we fought, and we defeated. But a victory that did what? Okay, we got our independence, we can charge taxes on ourselves. Now everything is taxed. It is very, no taxation without representation, we're being taxed like crazy on everything. So, but that's how Goyim celebrate. It doesn't matter what the purpose is and and then we won a war. That's the reason for the celebration. Ami says not like that. We don't celebrate victories. Victory is a means. We weren't able to keep Torah and mitzvot, now we're able to. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're not going to commemorate the miracle of the war. No. There's not going to be a commemoration. There's going to be Halel ve'odah. You're going to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for letting us win. Sure. In the tefillah, you're going to say, you let the few beat the many, you let the tzaddikim beat the reshaim, Zaydim biyad oskei toratecha, all the enemies of HaKadosh Baruch Hu were defeated by the hands of those that care about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yeah, we're going to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But commemoration, pirsumei nisa, is not going to be on the victory because we don't celebrate victories. We celebrate the ability to keep the Torah and to keep the mitzvot, period. That's the reason for celebration. How does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do that? He says, what was the first avodah? What was the first mitzvah that the Jews had that once they were victorious was the lighting of the menorah? That's what you're going to celebrate. Because that now, says the Zerah Shimshon powerfully, is going to represent the victory that you are now able to keep Shabbat, you're able to keep Kashrut, you're able to keep Rosh Chodesh, you're able to keep Taharat HaMishpacha, you're able to keep the entirety of the Torah, is all going to be encapsulated by the Nerot Chanukah. The Nerot Chanukah represent the ability to now, from now on, to keep the entire Torah and all of the mitzvot. And therefore, it in itself is like a sort of a sample of the entirety of the Torah. Now let's look at Nerot Chanukah and we see some amazing things. Because Nerot Chanukah is very unique. They didn't just command the individual, they commanded the community. And that is very much because there are two types of mitzvot in Am Yisrael. There are some mitzvot that a person performs individually. He puts on tefillin, he goes ahead and he gives tzedakah, he does chesed. A lot of mitzvot you perform as an individual. You keep Shabbat, but then there's communal mitzvot. We read Sefer Torah, we pray together, we say Kaddish u'Kedusha, there's Dvarim shebekedusha, all of that is a communal mitzvah. So Judaism has two sets of mitzvot, one for the individual, one for the community. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if the Chanukiah, if the menorah is to represent all of the mitzvot, so there's going to be one mitzvah that's going to be for the individual, and then there's going to be another Chanukah for the communal mitzvot, which is the Bet HaKnesset. Now it's starting to make sense why HaKadosh Baruch Hu and really the Chachamim hyper-focused on the Hidur, specifically by Chanukah. Because if Chanukah is supposed to represent the whole Torah and all the mitzvot that we are now able to keep because of the victory of the war, so therefore Chanukah is going to have Mehadrin. And not only is it going to have Mehadrin, it's going to have Mehadrin Mina Mehadrin. Why? To show you that not just Chanukah, all of the Torah and all of the mitzvot, it is our responsibility and our obligation to be mehader, to do as much hidur, as much as we can do above the letter of the law that is possible. And to really sharpen as much as we can to the point, I want to bring out a story, it's a true story, that happened in Bnei Brak. I don't know how many people know Bnei Brak. There's in Hebrew the word is kanyon. You know what kanyon is? Mall. Yeah, very good. You've been to Israel? You know. Kanyon means a mall, right? It's like kinyan. Kinyan in Hebrew means to acquire. Kanyon means you're acquiring a lot of things. So you go to the mall, you buy a lot of stuff. So there was in Bnei Brak, it's called Kanyon Rafaeli. It's a big mall. And obviously a lot of shopping, a lot of religious people, because Bnei Brak is very, very, very religious. So a lot of stores are very religious. And one time, this Rav, Rabbi Haim Zaid, he walked into the store. The store was like, I don't know if you remember Radio Shack? Yes. Bismano, right? Radio Shack. It was like a Radio Shack of Israel. An Israel version of Radio Shack, a very electronic type store. And he overhears a conversation. The conversation goes as follows. There's the seller and there's the person who's looking to buy. What is he looking to buy? This is back in the 80s, 90s. A radio tape player. They have the radios together with the tape. You would put the little tape inside and you would play it. So he's looking to buy one. He goes to the store. Do you have a radio cassette player? He says to him, I have two. Let me go to the back. I'll get them. and I'll tell you how much they cost. He goes to the back, he pulls out 2 different types. He says, this one, look, I'm going to be totally honest with you. This one is 800 shekel. That's about $300, let's say. 800 shekel, and this one is 250 shekel, which is maybe $80, right? Significantly less. He says, I want to be honest with you. There's no difference in quality between this one and this one. They all work the same. They have the same features, the same functions, the same quality, the same efficiency. Everything is the same. Just this one is 800 shekel because it's brand name. It's the only difference. If you take my advice, don't waste your money. Buy the 250. It's going to be just as good. Warranty, everything is the same. And chavada, you should waste your money. Without hesitation, the consumer, he turns to the owner and he says, no, I want the 800. He's like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I want the 800. No questions. Okay. He's the store owner. He's like, okay, better for me. Whatever, he wants to pay for the 800 one, all right. So he's like, I didn't ask any questions. Now, Rav Zaid, who was in the store, he overheard the conversation. He didn't make much of it. He went and finished his shopping, whatever he needed from the store, and decided to go to the next store. The next store that he went to was called Mishkan HaTchelet. Mishkan HaTchelet is very famous to the very day. It still exists, very popular in Israel. You see it all over the place. They basically sell Judaica, like talitot. If you go for bar mitzvot, almost everybody buys their talitot or their bags, their talit bag. It always says Mishkan HaTchelet on it. If you want to buy tchelet, then that's like the number one place you go to buy tchelet. So they sell a lot of Judaica related stuff. And he goes into the store, he needs to buy a few things, and who does he see over there? That first customer that was in the original store, the Radio Shack. And he sees him, and he sees him talking to the seller here. And he's asking him, listen, I need strings for tzitzit. He says, well, what type of strings do you need? There's handmade ones, there's machine-made, there's, Rav Mahfud Echsher, there's ones that are niputz lishma, there's thick ones, there's thin ones, there's long ones, there's short ones, like which one? He says, well, how much do they cost? He says, look, the cheaper ones are 17 shekel, the little bit more expensive is 19, the other one is 23, the other one is 25. He says, I don't need to be confused with all these facts, just give me the cheapest one. Chaval ala kesef. It's a shame to stam waste money. Give me the cheapest one. Rav Zaid is hearing this and his ears are cringing. This man just went to the other store. The store owner himself testified to him that the 250 was worth just as much as the 800 he stam spent. He threw money. What does it come out to? 550 shekel. He threw it down the drain for nothing, for brand name. And now he's making a big difference. It's 3 shekel more, 3 shekel less. Give me the cheapest one you have. How do you understand this? How do you put this two together? So that's the story. And really, it's our job to analyze. What is this guy? He's a bad guy? No, he's not a bad guy. What's the reason that he's willing to spend, without flinching, 800 shekel on that, and making a big deal over 3 shekel when it comes to that? And the answer is very simple. A person is willing and wants to be mehadir where his heart is. He will always be mehadir. He will always give value and will go the extra mile on things that are important to him, that are meaningful to him. And you see this in the world we live in all the time. How many people plan their vacations like months ahead, and every detail is the best? You go to a computer store. You say, I want to buy a computer. You say, well, there's one that's 8 gigabyte, but there's also one with 16 gigabyte. Oh, the 16. No, but there's one with SD. SD is better than the hard drive because it moves a lot fast. Oh, give me the one with the SD. Yeah, I want the SD one. Yeah, but there's the printer. It's not just color. It's special color. Oh, give me that one. Yeah, give me the one. And the person, you get caught up. So it's important to him. He's going to be mehadir. Person builds a house. He goes to the architect and the contractor, and he tells them. The contractor says, listen, this is your options. He's like, okay, I want to see all the different types of blinds. They show him a whole book of blinds. He says, okay, ooh-ah. He's looking for hours trying to choose between this one and that one. He lands the floors. Oh, the floors. Which one is the best one? Is this going to last longer? That one's going to last less. He's mehadir to no end. He's spending days, hours. It's crazy. The amount that a person is willing to spend. He buys a car. You have the car that's called fully loaded. You know what fully loaded, right? Everybody knows. Fully loaded. It has all the different tchotchkes and gadgets and chokhmot and it used to be cruise control was something special. I didn't even know what they have today. Today is like auto parks for you. Who knows what they're doing? Soon it's going to be flying and other things like that. But Lema'aseh, like if a person's and so much of the world, their heart is with the gashmiut, with the physical world. So you see that almost all of society is busy being mehadir on physical things because that is where their heart is located. Now this is really where I would interject sort of that I remember as I grew up with my mother, it was always the hidurim was so much with the mitzvot in the Torah. It was such a beautiful thing to see because almost every example and that comes to my mind about my mother is there was an uncompromising view when it came to Torah mitzvot of being mehadir. If it meant like I said, one of the examples I said, we went to House of David in 9th grade and I needed to buy a Mishnah Be'urah. Because the Rebbe said you have to get this volume of the Mishnah Berurah. I remember distinctly, she went to the store owner, she said, just give me the best one. I don't know, she doesn't understand anything about Mishnah Berurah. What does she know about Mishnah Berurah? She said, you're the store owner, you give me the one that's like the most expensive. That's the one I want, right? Because that's probably the best one. And she didn't care that she would have to spend more for it. It didn't matter to her, it wasn't even a calculation. Or if it meant that there's a Baal Koreh, I remember I was taught to read the Torah by one of the best Baalei Kriya in Los Angeles. His name is Rav Batzri. He moved out, now he lives in Inglewood, he lives in the East Coast. But he lived on the West Coast then, and he was the best Baal Koreh. He had a beautiful voice. He was, the Misoram, Iraqi, Yerushalmi. He's a great Chazan. He actually came to our Bet HaKnesset like 7 years ago once, like for an Arvit. And people like, whoa, who is this person? I was like, yeah, that was my, I don't know how many remember, but there are some people here. I remember that they were there. But he's great. But the problem was, he was 40 minutes away. I mean, it was a distance to travel. But every single week, she would take me, and no problem. He's the best one. He's the best one. That's it. There's no questions. That's called being mehadir in mitzvot. I remember before every holiday, she would make sure, there's no such thing as going into a holiday with clothes that are not new. What do you mean? It's a holiday. You have to have a new undershirt. You have to have new socks. You have to have new underwear. You have to have a new shirt. Sometimes a new suit. I don't remember exactly I don't think we always had got a new suit, but always the underclothes was always has to be new. How can it be not new? It has to be new. Right? Because it's a chag. It's a chag. And whether it came to the holiday of Chanukah was always a big holiday because there's always decorations in the house. She made sure that she made sure to get every single kid, whatever. When I was a kid, it was for me. When now it's the grandkids, everything that they liked. She knew this one liked that chocolate, this one liked that. Chanukah, everybody has to get it. Every single year when I'm living in New York, since the beginning of when I moved to New York, she would bring for my children a box. Always in the mail, I would see it would say like $35 for shipping, just for shipping. What was inside was less than the shipping itself, but she would want to make sure that it was like priority and he would get there on time. It would always be a box of chocolates. Why? For every kid, he needs to have his chocolate. As I was telling my mom, I call my mom, I tell her, we have this in New York. We have more in New York than what you have in LA. Like, you don't have to get it. I can get it. No, tzarich sheyeh lahem. They need to have. Why? Because when it comes to mitzvot and it comes to making people happy, especially in holidays, you have to be mehadir. And her heart was always with the hidurim. As my father said the story, every time she would go to see a new house, we moved a few times. There was one period of time where we lived in a house for a long time, and then after that it was just like navanad ba'aretz. We kept on moving one place to another place. In the same area, we kept moving. Every time they would check out a new house, the one important question was, can you build a sukkah? Is there room to build a sukkah? The room to build a sukkah, we're in business. If not, forget about it. There's nothing to talk about. That was the mentality. Because her heart was so much with the mitzvot, she cared about it so much that that's where the hidurim was. Instead of the fully loaded was in Torah mitzvot. That's what mattered. And what the important yesod here, this one I think is very valuable, is that people sometimes view this wrongly. They say, you could do a mitzvah and you could do mitzvah mehadrin. You could do it in a better way. And sort of the perception is, it's like, this is the mitzvah, this is a better way to do mitzvah. But it's not really the truth. A mitzvah that's done without the better way is a mitzvah that's a lot of times very superficial. It's a mitzvah that's chitzoni, that's external mitzvah. How do you know if a person really, really, really cares about the mitzvah, really matters to him? Is when he goes above, then that mitzvah is not an external mitzvah, it's a mitzvah from the heart. And if it's from the heart, he's going to do the best job because he cares about it. So the way you know what kind of a mitzvah he's performing, an external mitzvah or an internal mitzvah that he really cares about, is based on the hidul. It's a litmus test. So it's not just a better mitzvah, it's a completely different mitzvah. It's totally different. It's not the same as a mitzvah without the hidul because it's coming from a different area of the person. It's coming from the neshama of the person. And that's what makes a hidul much, much more special, which is why, again, why Chanukah, which is the highlight of the idea of the mitzvot, has that level of mehadrin to show the pnimiyut. And if you add on, there's an incredible Bach. The Bach writes that the whole reason why there needed to be a Chanukah, meaning the Greeks were able to defeat the Jews before the Hashmonaim came. The Greeks defeated Am Yisrael and got hold of Beit HaMikdash. How did that happen? How did HaKadosh Baruch Hu allow for the entire nation to lose the Beit HaMikdash, which is a big deal? The answer is, says the Bach, because the Kohanim were nitrashel ba'avodah, which means the Kohanim themselves were not doing their due diligence. They were negligent in doing, not that they didn't do things, but they did it half-heartedly. They didn't do an efficient job. They didn't wake up extra early. They didn't make sure that they really care. They didn't make sure that they're going to drive themselves to the fullest capacity in order to perform the mitzvot. Because they did the mitzvah half-heartedly, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you really don't care about the Beit HaMikdash. You're not doing it from your soul. You're doing it as an external action that I'm not going to give you Beit HaMikdash. You're not going to have it. The Yevanim are going to have it. Until Am Yisrael had to really energize themselves and to say, no, we're willing to put everything on the line to get our Beit HaMikdash back. We're put our own lives on the line. That's no bigger hidul than that. To put your life on the line for the Beit HaMikdash, you can say, whatever, it's not a big deal. Pikuach nefesh overrides everything. Right? But they fought for it. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you were so mehader in order to fight. Read it, the reason you lost it is because you were nitrashel, because you were lazy in the mitzvah. Now that you're fighting hard, I'm not only going to give you Beit HaMikdash, I'm going to go above and beyond giving you Beit HaMikdash. I'm going to make you a nis of Ner Chanukah, which I didn't have to do. You could have survived without the miracle. But I want to do that to show you that you went above the letter of the law. I'm going to go above the letter of the law. I'm going to break all the rules of nature for Am Yisrael. That was what's so special about Chanukah. And really, in truth, I think that a lot has to do with the secret. Like in Parashat Nitzavim, it says something very beautiful. It says, Hanistarot la'Hashem Elokenu. The secrets are to Hashem. V'aniglot lanu ulvanenu ad olam. And the things that are revealed are to us and our children. Now what does that mean, the things that are revealed? So there's a simple explanation. I'm going to say a different explanation. How do you know what's hidden in a person's heart? You see a person, and he's doing Torah mitzvot like everybody else. How do you know where it's coming from? So he said one way to know is how much he's mehadir. Okay, but let's say not. The way you see it, haniglot lanu ulvanenu. The way you see it is from his children. Because a person who really deeply cares, he's really animated, it's something that's important, it's valuable to him, it gets transmitted to the children. They see it, they learn from it, and they apply it to their lives. Whatever he absorbs, the children are innately, osmosis, affected by it, and they take that in their life. So if you want to know if the person has a meaningful, a really heartfelt connection, devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hanistarot la'Hashem Elokenu, it's revealed. Niglot lanu ulvanenu. Through the children, it's revealed. That's how you know. And we come back to Rav Huna and we say, okay, so a person lights Chanukah candles and therefore his children are going to be Talmidei Chachamim. That's not what the Gemara is saying. The lighting the Chanukah candles means he does it in the highest level that could be done. And it's not just the Chanukah candles, because the point is if he cares so much about the mitzvah of Chanukah, that means he understands the essence of Chanukah. And the essence of Chanukah was that the whole Torah and all the mitzvot we were able to now keep as a result of the great miracle of winning the war. And that's why we celebrate through the Chanukiah, really like the Zerah Shimshon, all of the Torah and all of the mitzvot are emblematic through the miracle of Chanukah. So when a person person is careful and meticulous about the details, about the halachot, about doing things properly, it means that mitzvot are not just a superficial act. It's something that comes from the heart of the person. It's something that comes from the essence of the person. So of course his children are going to be Talmidei Chachamim, because who's going to absorb that? Haniglot lanu vanenu. The children are the ones that absorb that and that see that and observe it and are able to apply it. So that's the pshat, how much that's the case. Also it says, one of the things, like Rav Ovadia, they asked him like what he did to have such great children that were such Talmidei Chachamim. He had an incredible success rate with his children. Not many great rabbis had that. There are a lot of Gedolei Yisrael that their children didn't even stay religious. So the fact that Rav Ovadia's children were not just religious, they were huge Talmidei Chachamim that continued in the ways of the Torah like their father, was a big, big thing. They asked him, how did he do it? And the answer really was, he didn't do much in the sense of like hands-on discipline, but the mere fact that when his wife would make dinner and say, Ovadia, dinner is ready, and he'd be like, Ken, I'm coming, and the children would see that he's like still in the sugya and he can't get himself out of the writing, and he's still busy writing while the smell of the food is so great and like everybody else is running to the table. They say, whoa, this is the father that really enjoys Torah. If he didn't enjoy Torah, you know what he'd do? Okay, I'm coming. And he'd put everything down and he'd run. That was the Abba. The Abba was a living example of somebody who cares and matters. And that's Ragil Bener, a person in those times, they didn't have electricity. So if you wanted to learn all night, what would you have to do? You'd constantly have to light candles in order to be able to. That means somebody who cares that much, is devoted so much to the Torah. It's so meaningful to him. Of course, his children are going to emerge from that to become great Talmidei Chachamim. And I think if I had to label the secret of who my mother was, it's that yesod. It's that everything she did in the spiritual sense came from such a deep care that you would sense it. As a child, I would sense like the love and the respect and the appreciation for every mitzvah. It was never a burden. It was always from a deeper place. It wasn't from an external place. It was from an internal place. And that's why me and my two sisters and the grandchildren, all of us were able to sense that, and she would give that over to us. It was a very powerful way of being able to show children that Chanukah is Chanukah. The celebration is so beautiful, and Be'emet is very worthy. I don't know if people realize on the timing, my mother passed away on Friday night. We left to Eretz Yisrael on Monday, right? And that's when my sister started sitting Shiva, was Monday. This was a week ago. And we got back, we joined together with the Shiva of my sister, which means that we ended the Shiva on Sunday. Sunday night already was Chanukah. In a certain sense, is like the incredible nature of my mother dictated, like, first of all, the fact that she passed away during the time of Chanukah very much represents who she was, because she was about the hidu. She was about the love. She was about the connection and doing the extra mile because she wanted to, and it really was always from the heart. Everything was from the heart. But more so than that, in sort of sense, she didn't impede. One of the things that I thought was very, very unique was I was able, because I wasn't home the first night I was in Los Angeles, Rav Ovadia writes that if you're not able to light at home and say the brachot yourself, especially on the first night, it's good, it's not an obligation, but it's good to try to light in the Bet HaKnesset, so that way you could say the brachot, because even though you're not in your house, but they have to light in the Bet HaKnesset, have to say the brachot, if you're able to light in the Bet HaKnesset, you get credit for that. So the problem was, an Aved is not allowed to light in the Bet HaKnesset. He has to light at home, because he's chayav in all the mitzvot, but he's not allowed to light in the Bet HaKnesset. So it's incredible, because of the way things worked out, the way she passed away and the way that we ended up going and came back, the Averut ended on Sunday. Sunday night I was already able to light. I asked the Bet HaKnesset, they're like, of course you could light. It's like my home shul. It was like where I grew up. So they're like, of course, you're the guy over here. So they let me light the Nerot Chanukah, and I said, my mother even afforded us the ability to be mehader in this minhag. She didn't want the Shiva to even impede into Chanukah. The Shiva ended right before Chanukah, which so much of what she was to allow us and to facilitate for us the ability to love and enjoy every single element of Judaism and to connect with it on a deep level. And it's so emblematic of what type of a person she was that I think it was very fitting, the timing of how things worked out. And this is the type of how special she was. And really that's the lesson to be learned, is that what we have to do, And the takeaway is to make sure that we're not just performing mitzvot because we're commanded to, but to really make it into an inyan. If it means like Shabbat, Friday night, something as basic as Friday night, to sit with the children and not just treat Shabbat normally. I always talk about how Chanukah is a perfect time to be together with your kids and to talk to them about the miracles of Chanukah and to tell stories and to sit down and to sing songs. These are amazing things that show that the mitzvah is coming from a very deep place in the person's heart and is not just an external mitzvah. And a person has to find in all areas of the Torah and the mitzvot to be able to really connect to that deeper shoresh, to that hidur mitzvah, that mehadrin mina mehadrin that Chanukah connects to, and where we're able to do that. And there's countless examples of how a person can translate that into his own life and to really encourage himself to connect, to really care about Torah mitzvot, that he will want to be mehader in that and to de-emphasize in his own physical life that concept. I actually, it's funny because we moved into our house 10 years ago. Around 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less. We moved into the house over here, and just recently, like a month ago, we decided that we should get clocks. So all these years, we only had one big clock in the living room because somebody gave it to us as a present. But like all the other rooms, there was no clocks. And it was a bit annoying because every Shabbat, it's like you want to find out what the time. You have during the week, you could check your phone. But on Shabbat, you never know what the time. You always have to go downstairs. It took us 10 years to get to the clocks. We didn't even get to the clocks until 10 years. They were laughing that we finally went on Amazon. We got $10, $15 clocks for different floors, so we have them. But that's the sort of mentality. That's a beautiful thing because that means that when it comes to physical things, it's like whatever. We'll get to it, it'll happen, you don't have to take care of it. Another 10 years later, it's not a big deal. We don't have to have it right away, right? Or we'll survive. But when it comes to spiritual matters, everything is on the table. You got to go ahead and you got to do it. And that's really the lesson of Chanukah. When a person implements that in his whole life and he cares deeply about the Torah mitzvot, he'll find ways to be mehader in everything that he does. And then his children really have the potency to become massive Talmidei Chachamim and really successful in learning. And I think that's the major secret. The major secret in having children that become Bnei Torah is that you care. And on a very deep level about the Torah mitzvot. You don't have to be a super, religious person. You doesn't have to be an outward. There's a person who really cares. He could dress simple, he could look simple, but he cares about Torah mitzvot, and it really matters to him. His children are going to end up Talmidei Chachamim. And that's why sometimes you see people that the parents are not necessarily the most learned and the most intelligent and the most intellectual, and they didn't go to yeshivot, but they really have that sincere want and desire. Their children end up being Torah scholars. It sounds like it doesn't make sense. What do you mean? The big rabbis should have children. No, it's them. Because they care about it. It's Haragil Bener Havelen Talmidei Chachamim. Coming back to the first point, my mother would light nerot for her grandfather. I think that was the pshat. The pshat was, when she would light candles, she connected to a previous generation. And that connection, that relationship that she had with the previous generation is really what allowed for her to have that yearning, that desire of wanting to continue the legacy, which led to her being chozer b'tshuva and led to her children and grandchildren becoming people of Torah and of mitzvot. Be'ezrat Hashem, his memory should be remembered for good. Yizicha Baruch, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we should be zochet to see Yeshuot v'nechamot in Am Yisrael, and Neshama should have an Aliyah. And Be'ezrat Hashem, Chanukah should be a Chanukah that we implement the lessons of the Hidur Mitzvah. Amen ve'amen. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen. Rabbi Hanina Makasha Omer, Asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lezako Yisrael v'chav Yisrael, shene'emar Adonai chafetz leman tzidko, yagdi Torah ve'yadir, yitgadal v'yitkadash, shemer Rabba, be'alma divera kiruteh.